The reason for this recording is that I'm going to be reviewing the unit for discussion board in Mgmt 691. Here, the work turns toward looking at culture. This is such an important topic for really any organization that's considering international or global operations, but it's especially important for companies that are their home markets are large, developed countries like the United States or Germany or France or the UK, because it's not always the case where companies based in these large developed countries take the time to really understand other cultures and how these cultures come to bear in their expansion or even just operations in these other countries. So this is a pretty fun discussion question. This first question, in your view, how can international businesses learn about a local culture? This is something where you can take the response here in a lot of different directions. You could say something like, one way might be senior managers or executive leadership in the country that is looking to understand the local culture. They can have exchanges where they go to the countries or country in question and spend time there to really understand. There could even be that the leadership that is really going to be involved in the expansion spend significant time there, let's say, a number of months to understand this culture in a deeper way. It could be that the organization is going to, instead of sending managers and executive leaders from the home country to the target country or countries, it could be that the company instead decides to bring in leadership from the target countries. So bring in locals that understand the culture in the target countries at a much deeper level. There's a lot of different ways you could take this. Any of these work just perfectly fine. So this next one, should an international business localize their products for different countries? Why or why not? I see this as kind of it's not necessarily a trick question, but it's a mixed question. At a fundamental level, the answer is yes and no. So let me explain. Think about something, and I think I used this example in a different learning activity early in the course. But think about something like an iPhone. You can imagine there's 195 countries in the United States. Now, I'm sure that the iPhone is not launched in all of them, but let's just say there are at least dozens of countries that are a target market for Apple. Apple can't possibly manufacture a phone for Colombia and a phone for Venezuela and a phone for Spain and a phone for Japan and a phone for Russia. It can't possibly do that. It can't possibly manufacture an all new from the ground up product for each of these countries. And yet there does need to be some level of localization. So what happens, a lot of companies, and this could be true of products, software, even services, a lot of companies have a standard technology or a standard platform. In the case of Apple, it has, the hardware is very similar. It has chips and it has glass and it has cases, and all of the hardware elements are very similar. And even some of the software elements are similar. But then there's also some localization. Things like the keyboard need to be localized. The characters on the keyboard could be how the apps work and interact could be localized. So there's some element of standardization that's necessary to operate a global business, but then there's also important localization that is necessary to really be relevant for the customer base. Okay, so this next one. It's, in your view, why is it important for international businesses to treat their foreign employees in an ethical manner? This question, you might think of it as, because it's the right thing to do. And of course, that's true. But if we go back in history, and even today, there are organizations that companies based, let's say, in the United States, and then there are foreign workers in China or in Vietnam or the Philippines. And we have well-documented cases where companies have not treated their foreign employees, even their contractors, in the right way. And so there's this fundamental question of, especially let's just take an example, Nike. That's just an easy one because they've had some problems in this area in the past. Nike is a large conglomerate that has billions of dollars in turnover, and it's a very powerful company. So imagine if there are people working for Nike in the Philippines. Well, it's easy to see that this is a situation where when there's such a power imbalance like this, that there's really the possibility to treat people in an unethical way. And so the reason why companies must treat their foreign employees in an ethical manner, there's a lot of ways you could take this. And I would just encourage you to pick one of the many different ways that you could take this and answer that question at a pretty high level. The key is, one of them, of course, is the right thing to do. That's a good way you could take it. So really talk about how companies want to be sort of consistent with their ethicals and values. With their ethics and values, and just how they see themselves. But then also, you could also take in the direction of optics. There are, Nike included, there are many companies that have suffered huge backlash and cost and problems in their operation because it was discovered they were not treating their employees in an ethical way. And I would also encourage you, don't just think about foreign employees, but also contractors. So companies are not just responsible for Nike is not just responsible for a Nike employee who works in the Philippines, but if Nike does contract manufacturing in the Philippines, they're also responsible for how those contract operations go, right? So how those contract operations treat their employees. Okay, so that's about it with this discussion question. Just as a reminder, it's very common, I would say the most common way that students don't earn the maximum available points here is that they just do not have a discussion question response in the initial reply in this 400 to 600 word range. And then also, because this is graduate level work, it's important to bring in high quality citations, in-text citations, and reference list entries in the initial reply. As far as the responses to other students, similar to some of our other discussion question responses, one way to earn points is to have at least 2 peer responses to other students, and that should be a relatively substantial reply at a minimum of 200 words. In the reply, one good way to take the discussion question reply, of course, is you can look at your post and your peers' post and really talk about some of the ways in which they're different and some of the ways in which they are similar. You can also just ask your peer questions if that's something that you wish to do as well. Okay, there's also a rubric, as you can see in here. This includes application of learning material content. This really is evidence that where you're applying critical thinking and comprehension from what you've learned into the discussion question reply. So this is where one of the ways you earn points in this class is you show that you understand the material and you can apply the material in a specific context. So this next one, application of course knowledge. This is really taking that application of the course material that you've learned and offering a unique insider perspective into the work. So there's 25 points for that. There's also 10 points available for your discussion question participation posts. And then you can see there's 8 points available for having good organization. And then finally, 7 points available for making sure that things like APA and grammar are tightened up in your post. Okay, so that is it for the Unit 4 discussion board. Just as a reminder, your instructors are invested in you and in your success. So please contact us if you have any questions or needs.